Cool. Good morning. Welcome. It's good to be together again today. My name's Joel. It's a joy and a delight to be together. Grab your drink, grab a seat. If you're joining us online, thank you so much for joining and participating. It's really good to be here today. I don't know if you've been watching The Apprentice is back on the BBC. We had a little hiatus for a couple of years, it was a little break, but it's back on TV. So I don't know if you're watching it or if you're into that show. But there's a character, or they're all characters, aren't they, on that show? there's an individual on that show, and he classes himself as a super fan. He's a Nicki Minaj super fan. His name is Navid, and he's got his own sort of Nicki Minaj tribute fan page with 380,000, I think, followers on his page at the moment. He's a proper this is on Instagram. He's a proper Nicki Minaj fan, and it's just an interesting little thing about an individual, isn't it? And the definition of a fan, if you look at what the word means, it just means enthusiastic admirer. This super admirer. And a fan knows their artist's favorite songs. A fan knows their artist's whatever movies they're in, whether they're an actor, if they're an author, you get all their books. They're the sort of people that buy these individuals' cologne and perfume. I always find it funny. Have you ever noticed, you can go to drugstores and, Superdrug or Boots or whatever, and it's got Justin Bieber's got 6 different varieties of cologne, who buys that stuff, Obviously, certain types of people, buy those perfumes and colognes, it's quite interesting. And David Beckham's got a whole range of sprays and stuff, if you ever wanted one. There you go. It's like the fans buy these things. The fans know all about that stuff. They follow someone on all their social channels. They follow them, don't they? You try to be connected. You try to sort of stay in touch with everything. And they just learn obscure facts, and they go out of their way. If they ever have the chance to meet one of their fans, I don't know if you've noticed this or seen this happen, but we used to live in Liverpool for our sins. No, just kidding. We used to live in Liverpool, and when we were in Liverpool, that was the year they won. I think it was the treble, actually. Someone might need to correct me, but they won a huge football, the Champions League. I corrected myself, and we went to the parade, and it's a double-decker bus. All the players, they're on top of the bus. They got the trophies and everything like that. It was, everybody showed up, whether you're a football fan or not, just because it was just massive buzz in the city. And we're there, and we're standing along the side, and the crowds are screaming, and the coach is going like this. And then one of the girls from our youth group at the time, Beth and I were sort of the youth leaders, youth workers, and then this girl jumps into the street and starts running after the bus, and she's going, Michael, from Michael Owen, with a great Scouse accent, which I probably won't attempt to do. However, right? So she was just running after this coach, and of course, what's what you're supposed to do with this 14-year-old sort of, running after you. We do that as fans, don't we? Sometimes these fans just have these explosions of hysteria and stuff like that. And I don't know if you've ever seen. It used to happen with the Beatles, didn't it? But here we have a recent image of a concert not that long ago, say pre-COVID, for Justin Bieber. So they're called Beliebers, by the way. If you want to know, if you're a Justin Bieber fan, you're a believer. So here we have some enthusiastic Beliebers. They'll do everything. They'll probably scream random things like, I love you, will you marry me? You're the best thing in the world. I'm so happy to see you. They faint. You can get really, really worked up as a fan. And when they get this chance to meet the person they admire, they blurt out random stuff like that. And you could just imagine, you're standing there, and this person's just saying stuff to you. And you try to catch the eye of your security entourage, and you're just stay close, And this individual really thinks they know you. But the artist doesn't really know these people. The artist he or she doesn't really know these fans. And even though this fan knows a lot about the artist actually doesn't doesn't really know the fan, you know? It's possible to know lots of details about somebody's life, their films, their first movie, their first break, the first thing they got to do, first guitar they ever owned, first gig they ever played, first band lineup that they were in. You know, there's a lot you can know about an individual, where they came from, what their home life was like. There's a lot of information you can know about the person, but still not know the person. And fans know a lot about the person, but they don't actually know the person. And the other thing that's interesting about fans is fans can actually switch pretty quickly. You can switch alliances. Just think about anybody who signed for a different football team. So a lot of people say the best thing to ever come out of Newcastle was Andy Cole. If you're a Newcastle United fan, that will obviously sting a bit. But anyway, you know, as soon as one of your football players changes teams, you know, I had a friend in Leeds, and Alan Smith signed for United, and I sent him a lovely little text to say, thank you so much for that. I really appreciate it, you know. And, you know, and he sends a picture back of like a Leeds jersey being set on fire. You know, like, you know, fans can do this. They can be a little bit fickle. They can sort of get upset and actually decide enough is enough. I've had enough. I'm leaving now. I don't like that individual anymore. You might have a favorite author, and they might write something or say something that you disagree with, and all of a sudden they fall out of favor. That's what happens with fans. And it's not too dissimilar to what we do sometimes. Sometimes we get, you know, upset by things, and we not only can walk away, but also we can also treat Jesus as if we are just a fan or an enthusiastic admirer. And quite a few years ago, a guy named Kyle Ottoman wrote a book called Fan or Follower. And he looks at this idea of if we're a follower of Jesus or a fan of Jesus. And we can do this. We can be enthusiastic admirers of Jesus. And we're doing a series at the moment called Follow Me. And it's all about, like, what did Jesus mean? What was he really talking about when he said follow me? You know, what was he looking for? More fans? Was he looking for more admirers? Was he looking for people to just hang out and sort of be part of the club and just sort of, you know, like what was going on? And I think in reality, a lot of us do admire Jesus. In culture, some people in culture admire Jesus. They don't even have to believe in Jesus to admire him. They think he's a great teacher. He's a great philosopher. In fact, you know, he did a lot of really helpful things like love people, be kind, do unto others as you should do unto them. You know, go the extra mile. You know, turn the cheek. You know, say good things about those who are mean to you. I mean, Jesus said a lot of really nice, pleasant platitudes. Let's really distill it down. I mean, he was polite and pleasant, and a lot of people admire him. They think Jesus is a really great philosopher, a really great sort of positive influence in life. A lot of people like the idea of Jesus, and then they admire Jesus from a distance. And it's easy for us to do that. We can admire Jesus from a distance until it gets a little bit challenging or uncomfortable, until he starts meddling in our lives. Then it gets a bit, ugh. But up to that point, Jesus is actually somebody that most of society, as a idea, a lot of society admires. And maybe you admire Jesus, or maybe you know people who admire Jesus. And I wonder, though, if Jesus wants something more than just admirers. Does he want people who know about him, or people that actually know him? It's quite a difference. Does he want people who appreciate him for who he is, or people that just appreciate him for what he does? There's quite a difference there. And then what happens when things don't go the way that you might have expected? What happens when things don't quite work out the way that you might have hoped or wanted? And people begin to see quite quickly that following Jesus is actually not the easiest thing to do. And the so cool thing about the Bible, which is just a collection of books put together into one big book, it's like a little mini library. And when you read the stories about the life of Jesus, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John are like biographies about the life of Jesus. And when you read in there, you can read about what people's firsthand, real life They were eyewitnesses, ear witnesses. They spent time with him. They heard and saw what he did. And they wrote about their experiences with him. And the so cool thing about it is it's just so honest. It's just so refreshingly honest about their experiences that they saw with Jesus. Because remember, they weren't writing it thinking they were creating a bestseller. Okay, that was a concept that didn't exist. They weren't thinking, hey, this will be the most published book for year after year after year after year, global phenomenon that's going to be translated into bajillions of languages. They never knew that. They were just writing down and recording their experiences. They weren't, this idea of like New York Times bestseller list did not exist, right? Okay, I would hope I can be the number one seller on the Jerusalem bestseller list. Yeah, ancient Jerusalem text. I'm hoping to get there, want to get an interview with Oprah. These guys are not thinking they're ever going to make it as authors. They're just writing their experiences, which is why it's so refreshingly honest. And they write about how actually it's not always easy to follow Jesus. And sometimes we actually want to unfollow or walk away from Jesus. And I want to look at a story today. You might have heard this story if you've been in church before. And even if you haven't been a Christian or grown up in church, you probably have heard this talked about before. There's a story in the Bible. It's in John chapter 6. And this was John who wrote the book of John. They didn't know how to give him cool titles back then either, Nowadays we would give it a much more exciting title. My Life with the Messiah by John, the most loved one of them all. It would just have a different title. But now, they didn't think that way. So it was just called John. So anyway, John, chapter 6, he writes this account. He remembers the story of a time that Jesus fed the 5,000. So you might have heard of that, whether you are a Jesus follower or not. You might have heard that story. Jesus fed the 5,000. And at the beginning of John chapter 6, what he's talking about is he says this, that it starts off by saying, Jesus had healed a whole bunch of people, and a crowd started to gather because they'd seen what had been going on, and they're like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. People are getting healed. Well, have you heard the news? Here's what's happening. Here's what's going on. And then it starts to just get this big swell of a crowd, this big people to start gathering around. They're trying to figure out what in the world's going on. And Jesus is teaching them and doing things. And what happens is as the day carries on, the crowds get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And then Jesus is like, oh my word, have you seen how many people are here? And then Jesus had compassion. We talked about compassion a couple weeks ago. This compassion that moves you for the sake of another, regardless of what the other person has done to get into that position. And he's moved with compassion because all of a sudden he's like, they haven't even had anything to eat. It's not like, hey, you idiots, why didn't you bring some lunch? Why didn't you? It's just like, wow. He's moved with compassion regardless of how they got into that situation. They're hungry and he wants to do something about it. So he's moved with compassion. And then there's this little story, you might have heard it before. They find a little boy who's got some food because everyone's like, hey, we have no way can we feed all these people. And Jesus is like, what have you got? And they said, oh, we've got a little lad, so let's steal his lunch, right? This is a great story. Okay, we don't have anything, but hey, that kid's got something, right? If you distract him, and then John, if you just sort of like rugby tackle him from the side, we'll get that sandwich off him, So they tackle him no, not really. So this little boy gives his food. He brings his food. 5 loaves and 2 fishes, it says. And Jesus takes this boy's lunch. It was in a little Paw Patrol lunchbox or something. It was camels back then. We've got dogs now. But anyway, so he takes his lunch and it says he blesses it and he breaks and he starts to hand it out. And it multiplies. It's like 5 loaves and 2 fish. Just for some reason, somehow, it just goes and goes and goes. And it says everybody had enough to be full and filled, and there was enough left over. It says there was baskets of food left over. Wow, if that doesn't say anything about the heart of God, just to not only just provide, but to abundantly provide. How crazy is that? It's like, let's have a buffet, but then let's do tons of extra food. It's just this generosity, what a cool story. And if you imagine there, imagine if you had been there. You're like, whoa, that would be so cool to see. Yeah. And if you'd been there since the night before or that morning or whenever the healings took place, maybe they'd happened the day before, I don't know. If you'd been there and you'd seen that other stuff that was going on, you'd been like, whoa, this is so cool. And then the next day, like all of a sudden, like, a little sardine and a soggy roll all of a sudden turns into a bunch of food that feeds thousands of people. And you'd be like, oh my word, this is so cool. This is like amazing. Okay. And this is not a small thing. Okay. This isn't like Jesus and a few of his friends sitting down and deciding to like get a pizza between 3 people. It said there were 5,000 men. So in this story, they'd only counted the men. It didn't tell us how many children were there, at least one kid was there. There was only one kid that was smart enough to bring some food, right? It was like, obviously there were no women there, because if women were there, there would not have been an issue with the food in the first place, right? Like, who would have let the whole family go out for the day and then been like, oh yeah, don't take anything. Yeah, it's fine. We'll be fine. Don't worry about it. Whoa. Have you got your stuff? Have you got your coats? Right. Hey, upstairs, get your coat. Get your lunchbox. Here we go. Yeah, obviously, there were no women there. That's why they're not. It wasn't that they were ignored. They just weren't. They weren't there. Obviously, Right. So there's a lot of people there, and it's a big event. It's like huge, and this is also kind of at the height of Jesus' popularity. This is when he's like, he's right in the crest of fandom. He is like, Jesus, hey. He's like really there, okay? This is when the whole place is going mad for Jesus at this time in his ministry life on earth. And there's thousands and thousands of people there. And it tells us, John writes, that Jesus needs to just like get some space by himself. This is what I mean about just being so honest. It says Jesus needs a bit of a breather. He's like, I'm spent. I cannot look at another piece of fish. He's just like, he just needs a bit of time. And it says he goes off by himself to just sort of retreat a bit, get some R&R, some prayer time, some relaxation. And so he goes up and he just has a little me time. He just sort of goes, he draws away. It's the evening. People are, by all accounts, they decided to just all sleep wherever they were, again, obviously it's just a bunch of guys, so that's what people do, right? Yeah, let's just lie down here and go to sleep. Okay, good idea. No. Anyway, they all stayed, right? They're all there. Jesus has retreated a bit by himself. But the disciples are going to get ready to move on. And it says that they went down, they got in their boat, and they crossed to the other side of this lake. It's a big lake. And it says that after they were 2 or 3 miles into this river, or lake, sorry, as they're in the middle of this river, lake, Jesus had decided to get up and go for a walk, yeah? And this is weird, okay? This is crazy. You'd think, how in the world? I don't know how it happened. But anyway, the guy can walk on water. So he's walking on the water. And the disciples are there. They're in the boat, and they're, rowing in the boat. And then, of course, they think they see a ghost because nobody walks on water. Again, the book is so honest. They're like, what the heck? What's going on? We're going to die. It's a freaking ghost, and like, but he's like, no, it's me. It's okay. It's me. He gets in the boat, and then they arrive to the other side of the shore. Now, that would have been very cool to see. Okay, so you've seen the healings, you've seen all these people get fed, and then a select group of you have also then seen the guy walking on water. Just think about it. If you'd seen these things, of course you'd write about them, right? Of course you would. My time with Jesus. Well, once we sat down and just killed some time for an hour. No, man, you would write about these things, right? This is why they wrote about all these exciting things, because they saw them and experienced them. So they crossed the other side of the lake and everything. And then we sort of carry on with the story. So here's what happens. The next morning, all these thousands of people wake up, and they're like, oh my gosh, where did he go? Where did he go? Where did he go? Where did he go? And they just wonder where in the world Jesus is. It's like a big game of Jesus hide and seek or something. So they're like, where in the world is this guy? So they can't find him. And then it says that they notice one of the boats is missing. They realize, oh, I know what. He's gone to the other side of the lake. So this huge crowd, imagine the scene. Everybody's like, rah, rah, Jesus, Jesus. And they just have this huge crowd that makes their way all the way to the other side of this lake. And it says this in John 6, sort of 25. It says, when they found him on the other side of the lake, could you imagine like being in the front of that crowd? You're like, I found him, yeah! You know, everyone rushes around you, pats you on the back. You're like, you're the champion. You know, you found Jesus. You know, it's great. You found Jesus. Your life's changed, right? So they found Jesus, and they say to him, they're like, when did you get here? You know, it's just such an honest book, isn't it? You know, it's like, when did you get here? And it's crazy. Now, just think for a moment, like, so Jesus has been healing people. He's fed loads of people. And then there's a whole group of people that are still following him. And the kind of thing that would happen is just like when, guess what? When the Beatles came into town and word got out that the Beatles were landing, and all of a sudden you told your friend and you told your friend and your friend told their friend and their friend told their friend. You know what I mean? It just spreads, doesn't it? It gets bigger and bigger. So you can imagine that by this point, the crowd is ginormous. You know what I mean? Things are going on, and people want to see this stuff that they heard about. They want to see more of these things going on. And they're just like, you know, and then it's like, where have you been? When in the world did you get here? And then Jesus answers them in a really sort of bizarre way, and he just says this to him. He says, you're looking for me not because of the signs, but because I've filled your stomachs. Don't strive for food that spoils. You know, don't spend all your energy on food that just, passes. You're going to see that fish and bread again. You know, don't spend all your life on something that's actually just going to move on. Go after something which is eternal, which is lasting, which is going to go on and on forever, not temporary. You know, he doesn't even answer their question. When did you get here? He just like pops the whole bubble. You know, I mean, you're at the height of your fame, and you're essentially saying, yes, but you're only after the food. You've missed the whole picture. You've missed everything that's going on. You think, dude, man, that's like the worst time to say something like that. You know, if you got thousands of people behind you, now's the time to say, okay, let's get on a horse ride in Jerusalem and say, here's our new king. Let's make it all happen. You've got the crowd with you now. You could really make some change. You know, you could really make a difference. You know, you've got the masses with you now. Let's do it. And he just sort of like, it's kind of a crazy response, don't you think? And then there's this discussion between the crowds and Jesus, and they're saying, well, okay, they're asking for a sign. Like, give me a sign. Hit me, baby. No, feed me, Jesus, one more time. No, like they want a sign, right? They're like, give me a sign, give me a sign. And he's like, you've missed the sign. I am the sign. Jesus says, I am the sign. You're looking at it. And then he goes on and he says this. He says in John 6, verse 35, I am the bread of life. Whoever comes to me, so I am the bread of life. Whoever comes to me, you're never going to go hungry again. And you know what? You're never going to go thirsty again. Okay, and he's not talking about natural food, is he? We're clever enough, whether you're a follower of Jesus or not, whether you believe in all this faith stuff or not, you and I know this. He's not actually talking about real food here, is he? Because plenty of instances are recorded after this when Jesus himself sat down and ate with people. He's talking about something different. Something else is going on here. I'm the bread of life. And if you have the bread that I give you, you're never going to be hungry. If you drink from the drink that I am giving you, you'll never be thirsty again. Because if that were the case, then Tesco would have gone out of business, right? He's like, you'll never thirst again. And you can imagine with the crowd that size, there would have been really a lot of attention, a lot of stuff going on, wouldn't there? There were people there who weren't there the day before, and they'd heard about what was going on, and they wanted in on the action. They wanted to see what was going on. I heard about this. I heard how you healed my friend. I heard how you healed a friend of a friend, or fed one of my friends, or fed a friend of a friend. I've heard about what you did, what you've done. And here they are, and they're like, show me what you can do. I want to see your party trick. So this is really what's going on. I've heard about what you can do, and now I want to see you do it again. Let's see your party trick. Come on, J-boy, you can do something for us now. This is, I don't mean to be coarse, but this is really what it's talking about. This is really what's going on here. I've heard about you do these things. A friend of a friend of a friend saw this. I saw you do this for this person that I know. You can do it again. Do it for me. They want to see him do something. And the funny thing is, he doesn't even entertain the idea of entertaining them. He's not even going down the route of being a parlor trick, and he doesn't even answer their questions. Right? He just is constantly trying to shift their focus to allow them to see something a little bit differently. He's just kind of like, there's something else going on, and I want to show you what's going on. He's just constantly, when you read John 6 is a big chapter, that's why we're condensing it. He constantly pushes them into something else. And then he says, okay, let me explain it like this. You know who Moses is. Okay, Moses is Charlton Heston. He's in this film, and he does this stuff, and the water goes like this. Yeah. So the Prince of Egypt, So Jesus is like Moses, And now Moses, for a Jewish person, is oh my gosh, he's like their hero. Yeah, one of their great epic heroes. Moses is way up there. Okay, and so Jesus is like, you remember Moses. And when Moses was there, and when Moses helped free the Israelite people, the Jewish people, out of Egypt, they were slaves, they got freed. And the whole thing with Moses and Pharaoh, and there was the whole stuff going on. Check it out online. There's lots of movies about Moses. You can watch it. And so when they're in the desert, they've got no food. And then this crazy thing happens. They get this manna from heaven. So while they're in the desert, food comes down, okay? And it feeds these people, this whole bajillions of people in the desert are eating this manna. And Jesus is like, you remember when food came down from heaven, when Moses was leading his people. And then Jesus says, food has come down from heaven again. I am the bread of life. I am the food from heaven. This is what he goes on to say. He's trying to say to them, I'm the bread from heaven that's come down for you. I am the bread from heaven, and my Father has sent me. This is what he goes on to say to them. And then Jesus says this thing, which is really actually obvious. It's very true. He says, they ate all this bread in the desert, and every single one of them are dead. Which, of course, is true, because they lived thousands of years before this story. Jesus is like, they had this bread, but they've died. You're being offered a bread, and you will never die. This is what he's saying to them, and that's how bluntly he puts it. And he says, my Father has sent me for this purpose, to send me to be the bread of life. And then, this is what's so cool, and it says the crowd starts to grumble a bit, because wouldn't you grumble? The person you admire isn't actually doing the thing that you admire them for. Recently, Adele had to cancel a set of gigs, right? You might have seen this in the news, maybe not. Adele was supposed to start first big concert. She has a residency in Vegas. Whole month of concerts. Her first concerts in I don't know how long. She's not like one of those people that just does loads of concerts, right? So she had but they had to cancel it. And do you remember when they had to cancel it? Did you see in the news? Did you just hear? That day, the evening before, within 24 hours before this stuff started, she had to cancel the concert. Out of her control, totally upset. Half the people, they just couldn't pull the show off. Half of her crew had COVID. She just couldn't pull it off. But there was a lot of people who'd already spent money on tickets, and there was a lot of people who'd already spent money on flights and already had arrived in their hotels and things like this. And the fans grumbled because they didn't get what they wanted. And it says here in this story, it says the crowd began to grumble because, you see, they're not getting what they want. They're not getting what they expected or what they feel they deserved. And so they're like, oh, they starts to grumble. And then it says this so cool thing. It's like, how can you be the bread of life? Aren't you the son of Mary and Joseph? This is what some bright spark says in the crowd. Like, hey, wait a minute. What do you mean your father? Don't we know his dad? This is Joseph's boy. Isn't that cool? Don't you think this is cool? Like this kind of thing is being recorded? They're talking about like, wait a minute, no way. Well, what are you on about? Like, we know where you're from, okay? Let's just bring you down a peg or two. Jesus, just remember who you are, where you came from, okay? It's nothing to do with this like other stuff that you're talking about. How can you say you're from heaven? And he just keeps explaining to them what they need to do. And then he challenges them a bit more, and he says, but like what I'm talking about, the bread of life, is like, I don't know how else to explain it to you. You essentially like, I am the bread of life. You eat me. Which is kind of weird. He didn't mean it literally, of course, right? It wasn't like sit down, get a napkin, get some salt and pepper, a bit of like Tabasco, and like, cut off a finger of Jesus and gnaw on it, okay? He's like, I don't know how else to explain it to you. That you have to somehow, what I offer, what I'm giving you, has to get in you. And the only way I can help you understand is because you've just been eating food, so I'm going to keep talking about food, and you have to eat food for it to get inside you, for the food to do something inside you to affect you. I'm the same. It's the same way with me. Like, I've got to get inside you. Something about me, my presence has got to be in you. It's like eating my bread, drinking my blood. It's like, this is how he explains it. He's not some psycho cannibal. He's just trying to make it so people understand what he's talking about. And it's quite a misunderstood concept as well. Some people misunderstand what Jesus was talking about. But how else can he help people understand? You just have to be me in you. And they're like really grumbling, and they say, this is like, so not what we expected. And then it gets even more honest. This narrative goes to this. It says, when they heard this, many of his disciples, disciples were like the people that chose to follow. The disciples were the ones who were like the in crowd. Many of the disciples, many of the followers said, this is a hard teaching to accept. I'm not exactly sure which bit of the hard teaching, the bit that you're sent from heaven, that you are the bread of life, that you have to, but the whole idea, the whole concept, this is a hard teaching to accept. Or hang on a minute, this is a hard teaching to accept that you're not there for our party tricks. You're not there for our parlor show. You're not there to do pyrotechnics. You're there for something more. This is a hard teaching to accept. And from that time on, many of his disciples chose not to follow him. It's like when your favorite football player, the hope of your team, has just signed for the opposition. That's it. Kick comes down off the wall. That's too tough. It's too hard. This is tricky. And I love that it's honest, because we've been doing this whole series looking at what it means to follow Jesus. And if I didn't actually talk to us about the idea that following Jesus is sometimes hard, then it wouldn't be honest. Because following Jesus is actually sometimes tricky. We can understand some of the crowd getting upset about what Jesus is saying. But John writes that his disciples and followers, people who had already jumped on board, had decided, this is really tough. This is too tough. I'm moving on. And Jesus, we looked at it the other week, didn't we? Following Jesus means that you change the way you live, and it changes the way you love. You don't do that first. You don't do that to earn Jesus' favor, because what happens is you follow Jesus and then you start to live differently. You don't have to perform. Jesus only invites unbelievers and misbehaviors, okay? The entry level is low. The door's open wide. And you don't change first, you change after you follow. You don't have to change to be loved. You actually you actually change because you are loved. You don't change to be loved. You change because you are loved. You're not excluded. You're included. So we looked at that as well at the beginning. But as you begin to follow Jesus, you begin to realize actually some of what he asks us to do is quite challenging. And because at some point it's going to cost us. It costs us our time. It costs us relationships. You might have to say no to some things. You might have to say yes to other things. You're going to have to learn how to be kind and gracious and forgiving and loving, because you're going to learn to live and love like Jesus lived and loved. And that's not easy. We talked about that the other week, didn't we? And relationships cost something. But you know this is true. You don't even have to be a Christian or Jesus follower to know that's true. If you've got family members, you know that relationships can be tough. Right? That just is. Okay? Even if you have a dog. If you have a dog, it's a bit messy sometimes. Yeah? You want to invest your life in something else, and you get this lovely, nice puppy that interrupts your life and makes messes. You know, every relationship is going to cost you something. Whether every relationship, you know this is true. It happens in the workplace, it happens in your home life, it happens in your family life, it happens if you have animals or children. Sometimes they're the same thing. But anyway, that's another topic for another day. You know relationships, you know this. You know relationships are costly. And if following Jesus is about relationship, then at some point it will be costly. At some point there will be a challenge. And then what do we do? For those of us who might feel like we're disciples, what do we do when it gets to that stage when things don't go our way? Because sometimes they don't. When that miracle we're hoping for doesn't happen, when that loved one we're praying for doesn't get that job or get healed or get better, or when that relationship that we long for doesn't get restored, when that child that we love hasn't come home, when that situation that we want to see sorted doesn't get sorted, what do we do then? Yeah? You know, I mean, the crowd had already seen Jesus do something. They'd seen him heal people. They'd seen him feed people. So why in the world won't he do it again? Why not? Hey, why won't you do it again? We know you can do it. We've heard about you doing it. We've seen you doing it, but you're not going to do it again. And if only you were good, or if only you were kind, if only you were loving, you would do it again. And then we want to just walk away. Because for some reason, he hasn't done what we wanted him to do. He didn't perform for us the way we wanted him to perform when he can do it, because we know he can do it, but he's not doing it. Why are you not doing it? I've heard about this. I've heard you can do it. A friend of a friend of a friend has seen you do it, or you did it for them, or you did it for somebody else. I know you did it for them. Why won't you do it for me? How do we follow when we're in that place? Because if we're really going to be honest, we will be in that place at some point in our lives. If you're not there yet, you will be in that place at some point in your life. If you're a follower of Jesus, there will be a moment when you're just like, oh man, come on, I do not understand why in the world you will not do what I want you to do. And not only that, you won't do what I know you can do. And we don't. The whole thing goes into question. Or we say, well, okay, if only you'll do this, then I'll believe. Okay, yeah, we're going to explore Jesus. Maybe you got people in your life, maybe you're in this position yourself. You're thinking, well, let's explore the idea of Jesus. I'll wait for him to show me something, and then I'll believe. And sometimes Jesus shows people things, and sometimes it doesn't work out that way. They're like, if only you would do this, then I'll believe. It's kind of like we want the party trick again, you know? Give us a sign. And Jesus said in John 6, verse 36, he says this, you've seen me, but you still don't believe. You ask for a sign, but I'm the sign. He said that to the crowd in the discussion that we referenced. And story tells us that, Jesus is there saying, you can see me in the flesh. I'm here, real life, blood, hair, real life in the flesh, come and shake my hand, and you still don't believe. We think it might be hard for us sometimes to believe because we can't even see Jesus. Obviously he's no longer with us in the physical presence. He can't just sit down beside you and have a little chat to you. You can't nudge shoulders or lean in and have a little chat. He's not there in the person. We think, if only he was here in person, then we would believe. But hang on a minute. This is so honest. This is telling us that people who could see him in the real life flesh still didn't believe. He said, I'm here in the flesh, and you still don't believe. You ask for a sign, and it's standing right in front of you, and you still don't believe it. And the thing is, when Jesus doesn't do what we want, when Jesus didn't do what they wanted, they stopped following. When Jesus didn't answer their questions, because he didn't answer their questions. When Jesus didn't answer their questions, they stopped following. When Jesus didn't answer their prayers, they stopped following. And it's just like us. As soon as we can hit trouble or challenges, we're tempted sometimes to unfollow. We're tempted to say, enough is enough. I've had enough of it all. I'm walking away. Things get a bit tricky, things get a bit challenging, and we decide to walk away. Maybe Jesus is challenging us to live more like him or love more like him, and it's just too much. I don't want to do these kind of things. I preferred it when you were just the guy who would feed me nice, warm bread. I don't like it when I have to do something else. When I've got to do something. I don't like it. I prefer you when you're telling stories. I prefer you when you do your anecdotes. Tell us another one of those stories. You're really good at stories, Jesus. Just tell us another one of your stories. I prefer them like that. Just do that thing where you sort of, upset the apple cart by, speaking against the religious people, because that's really cool when you do that. Just do that thing where you speak against religious people and tell them to stop being just whitewashed idiots and putting on a big show because they're a bunch of frauds. That's cool. Go for that, Jesus. I like that, Jesus. Or I like this, Jesus. Do that thing where you tell us how to look out for those who are, forsaken and outcasts and write-offs and do that kind of thing, Jesus. Do that thing where you just sort of include the people who are excluded. I like that kind of Jesus. Go back and be that sort of Jesus. Just feed me warm bread. Do the thing that I want. And it's so tough. It's really tough. And here's what's so lovingly cool and honest about this chapter. It carries on. And it says this. In John 6, verse 67, Jesus turns to the 12. You got a huge crowd. You got a group of followers. And you got the 12. The 12. That would have been a better book title, wouldn't it? The 12. Instead of Matthew. No. So the 12. So Jesus pulls to the 12, and he says to the 12, the closest circle, the guys that have been with him for 3 years or 2 years at this point, a couple of years, they've been with him already. They've seen so much stuff. They've been around him for a couple of years. They've been his closest followers. They've been his closest friends. And he says to the 12, do you want to leave as well? I told you the Bible is honest. These stories are honest. They're honest experiences from real people who had real experiences. And Jesus is like, you guys want to go as well? And then Peter replies, his answer is this. He says, but where can we go? Where can we go? Where else can we go? Because you alone have the words of life, and we believe that you are the Holy One of God. Where else can we go? Because you have to go somewhere else. If you don't follow Jesus, you will follow something else. You might not think of it that way, but you do. Whether it's yourself or ideologies or philosophies, whatever it is, if you don't want Jesus to be the ruler of your life, something else will rule your life. Whether it's the pursuit of success. I mean, you might call it ambition, but really it's greed. or selfishness. Those things rule your life. Those things drive your life. You might call it we candy coat it and call it other things, but something will rule your life, whether or not it's Jesus, something will. And Peter's like, where else can we go? What's the other choice? What else are we going to do? Where else can we go? And these guys have made their choice. But it didn't stop them from having fear or doubts or uncertainties or making mistakes, because when you read the rest of the story, you find out that they still made mistakes, they still had doubts, they still had fears. So even though they made their choice, it doesn't mean that you're going to be without doubt, without fear, without uncertainty. Deciding to follow Jesus isn't like, woohoo, everything's going to work out now. Read the stories from the people who lived it. That's not what they're telling us. It's not what really happened. And they're also telling us it's not easy, because sometimes you get so challenged to the point where you're like, I am so ready to just throw in the towel. I've had enough of this whole faith thing, church thing, community thing. Just enough. Let's walk away and to be done with the whole job lot. That's what they're experiencing. And maybe you're here today and you're still exploring, you're discovering, you're trying to work out what it means to be a Jesus follower. And I'm so glad that you're able to participate today, because you can hear the honest stuff about what's going on. It's so important. I'm so glad. And you know what I would love to do? I would love to tell you, just follow Jesus and everything in your life will be sorted out. I would love to tell you, just follow Jesus and you're never going to have any anxiety in your life. I'd love to tell you, just follow Jesus and all of your fears will go away and all of your problems will disappear. And I'd love to tell you that all of your relationships will be perfect. And I'd love to tell you that unicorns exist and every time you sneeze, it blows flowers and butterflies. I'd love to just tell you that it would be so perfect and everything would just be easy now. And you could just live in some ethereal bliss where everything is nice and nothing is hard work. I would just love to tell you that. But if I told you that, I would be an absolute liar. Because following Jesus is not a promise that your life becomes rosy. It's a promise that your life will be different. And it's not a fading life, it's an eternal life that will never, ever go. Why? Because Jesus says, I will never, ever leave you or forsake you. He's all in. He's all in. He's not changing his mind. He's not, but you're still allowed to change your mind. But he's all in. He is all in. And whether you're a follower of Jesus or not, you know this is true. You know if someone's lying to you and telling you that everything's just going to be all perfect and rosy. You know in your heart. You just know it, don't you? We're not stupid people. We know. We just know. And every authentic relationship involves a cost. We know that. And following Jesus is costly. Following Jesus is costly. It will cost you something to choose to follow Jesus. Jesus doesn't promise it's perfect, but he promises you won't be alone. You will not be alone in it. And I want you today to consider the cost of following Jesus. Consider the cost. Just think about it, please. I don't know where your heart is today. Only you know that. Maybe it's been easy to go along with the motions. It's been easy to pretend that we're participating. But in reality, maybe you're thinking, maybe I'm more of a fan. Maybe I'm actually more of an admirer of Jesus. Maybe I'm more somebody who likes what you can perform and do for me. I like to know this stuff about you, but I've realized I'm not really knowing you. Maybe that's where your heart's at. Maybe this is just something you do because your parents have dragged you along, or this is just what you do in your family. I don't know. Maybe you just do this because you feel it's the right thing to do. Or maybe, like most of us have, maybe you've been tempted at some point in your life to stop following. Maybe that's where you are right now. Maybe you're at that place in your life where you're actually thinking to yourself, this is too hard. I'm done. Things are not worked out the way I wanted. You didn't do what I expected. You could have done it, but you didn't. It's too much, You didn't heal that person. You didn't provide in this way. You didn't make such and such happen. The job didn't come through. Whatever it is. Whatever it is for you. The one thing that he didn't do that he could have helped or could have made happen, he hasn't done. And so you're ready to just walk away. Maybe that's where you're at today. You're not the only one that's ever been there. Even his followers, his close disciples were in that place. So you're not on your own in having to wrestle with this stuff. Or maybe you feel like you've been a bit of a half in, half out. You can compartmentalize. You're compartmentalized if everybody at work has no idea that you're a Jesus follower. If none of your colleagues have any idea that you follow Jesus, then maybe you compartmentalize. If the rest of your family, if your neighbors don't know that you're a different person just because of the way that you've begun to live and love others, then maybe you compartmentalize because it's easier to just be a Jesus follower here with a nice group of people and not be a Jesus follower when we're outside amongst other people. If nobody else knows, then maybe we are compartmentalizing. Maybe we're not all in. Jumping all the way in, maybe. Or maybe you're at that stage where your heart is, you're just still considering, and you're not sure if you're ready for the cost yet, and that's okay. But I have to warn you, at some point, you'll have to make a decision. At some point, you make a choice. And it might take you longer, it might take you shorter. You might know, some people are really decisive and some people need more time. That's okay. But I have to tell you up front, at some point, you'll reach decision point. You have to make a choice. At some point, there's a choice to be made. So get ready when that day happens. Maybe it's today, maybe it's not. But one day, you will have to make a choice to say, I follow you. I don't fully understand. I follow you. I'm in. Let's go. Let's do it, I don't understand. It's not all working out the way I want, but hey, I'm just in. I'm in. And when that moment comes, you'll know it in your heart. You will know in your heart, yeah, today's the day I got to make a choice. You'll know it. You will. You'll know it. It just, life's a series of choices, and it'll just happen. Am I in or not? Do I stay or do I walk away? Do I stay? Do I walk away? And when that moment comes, it's like the pieces just fall together. It just starts to make sense. And you'll just know what your next step is. You don't know the end from the beginning. You just know your next step. And we would love to help you find and follow Jesus. That's our vision. That's our passion. And wherever you are, whether you're ready to walk away from it all, or whether you're not sure where you're at, or whether you've just been so happy to mix and match and compartmentalize, wherever you are, we want to walk with you and help you journey in your steps of faith to find and follow Jesus. We want to, that's what we're here for. That's what we believe in. That's why we're being honest when we talk about what it means to follow Jesus. Maybe today could be the day you just say, I surrender. You know what? I am ready to make a decision. I'm ready to yield. I'm ready to say, God, you can have it all. And today when we close, we're not going to have a worship song. We're not going to do anything other than a short prayer is going to come up on the screen. And I'm going to ask you to consider praying this prayer. And I'm going to say to you, I'm telling you up front, it will cost to follow Jesus. And maybe you've realized I've been compartmentalizing and I just need to make a choice to recommit. I need to make a choice to say, yeah, I need to start learning to live like you live and love like you love. I need to just make that choice. Maybe today's that day where you make a recommitment. Or maybe today is the day that you make the first commitment, the first time you've ever made this choice to say, I choose to follow you. The invitation is open for everyone. It's regardless of what you've done, and it's everything that what he has done. Everyone is invited. Everyone is invited. There's nothing you can do to exclude you from being welcomed to knowing Jesus. So we're going to have this prayer come up on screen, and I want you to look at it first. And it just says, today I choose to follow you. I commit to follow you everywhere, in every moment, with everything. And what we're going to do now is just pause and consider what that means. And if that's your prayer, if that's where your heart's at, you could say it out loud, you can say it under your breath. I want you to pray that prayer. It might not be your day today, and that's okay. And you might not feel this is applicable, and that's okay. It's totally fine. But if you know in your heart that this is something you need to do and say today, then we can do it. God, I just thank you for everybody here this morning. I thank you for everyone here online. I thank you that you've invited us to learn and discover more about you. I thank you for the honesty of the people who are around you, the things they wrote and experienced, and it's just like us today. Thank you for the opportunity to consider what it means to follow you. And God, for those of us who are making this choice today, we say that we choose to follow you. We commit to follow you everywhere, in every moment, and with everything. Help us as we go forward. And in your name we pray. Amen. If you've prayed that prayer today, and it's the first time you've prayed that, where you know in your heart, you know what, today's the day I'm making a choice to follow Jesus. We'd love to speak with you, love to chat with you. If you've got any questions, come and find us, be over here on the side. Speak to Sam at the back, speak to us. We would love to journey and walk with you wherever you're at. And that's great. Next week, we're going to follow up. We're going to wrap up this series. And so next week is our last one. If you have missed any of the stuff, I know I referenced quite a few of the things that we talked about already in this series. You can catch them online on our website or the YouTube channel. But have a great rest of the week. And grab your kiddos. It's so cool to be together again. And thank you. Bye-bye.